Welcome to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. Today is Monday, May 5th, day 577 of the war. Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our military reporter, Emanuel Fabian. Hi, Manny. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Amanda.
The Security Cabinet announced last night that it had approved the operational plan for the next phase of the campaign in Gaza, which would mean actually, quote unquote, conquering all of the Gaza Strip and holding the territories. So Manny will discuss what this actually means on the ground. We will also learn about the probe into the Houthi ballistic missile that struck the compound of the Ben Gurion International Airport yesterday, and the probe into why it actually did land on the ground. And finally, we're going to turn to the IDF's probe into the October 7th battle at the Zikim beach, which was released yesterday. All of this and more when we're back. Late last night, Israel approved a plan to significantly broaden the military offensive against the Hamas terror group in the Gaza Strip, and the plan provides for the, quote, conquering of Gaza and retaining the territory. So one voice was heard above all in warning, and that is IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir, who warned that the hostages may be adversely affected by this plan. Manny, the term in Hebrew, as you pointed out, is kibush, which is a term that, of course, also means occupation. So it is the conquering and occupation of this territory. What do you know about this plan so far?
So this is a plan that the military presented to Netanyahu last week over the weekend. I think it was on Friday morning they presented this to him, and he approved it. The military presented several plans, and they always do. They have different options for the prime minister, for the government to decide on which route they want to go, and then these plans were then presented to the cabinet yesterday, last night. And the government then voted to approve one or the other or parts of a certain plan. The army normally gives many options for them to choose from, whatever they're capable of doing. And during this meeting, Zamir warned that the option that they went with, which is, as we saw the announcement today, essentially conquering Gaza, holding the territory permanently, not going in and out like Israel's been doing until now, will have an effect on the hostages, and as a result of going into these areas of Gaza or ramping up activities in a certain way, will lead to harm to the hostages. I think that's clear. Hamas has, of course, said many times before that it will kill hostages if Israeli troops get close. Airstrikes, as much intelligence that Israel has on where the hostages are, they don't know exactly where all of them are. They could be mistakenly targeted in strikes. So this is the chief of staff's warning. Of course, the army will do everything it can to make sure that the hostages are as safe as possible and not harmed in these operations. But regardless, we're not seeing this new phase being launched just quite yet. It may take a bit of time before Israel actually goes into this intense fighting.
Now, you used the word permanently hold, and I don't think that is actually indicated in this plan, that there's no plan at this point to permanently hold the Gaza Strip and turn it into the West Bank too, as far as I understand it. I think we're talking about a wartime plan at this point. Is that correct, Manny?
Right. So, yeah, it is wartime, but we've seen things from the defense minister who said that the buffer zone along the Gaza border, which is now 30-40% of the Strip, Israel will hold permanently. So this new statement saying that Israel will conquer Gaza and hold the territories, they don't say permanently, but I think it's definitely for the long term. I don't think it's a short-term thing. It's definitely until Israel sees that there's an alternative to Hamas in Gaza, another entity that takes civilian control over the Strip, or some other arrangement that allows for Israel to not be in charge of the civilians in Gaza. But I think in the long term, it looks like Israel, if they go ahead with this plan, will end up conquering Gaza and holding it for the foreseeable future.
Alongside this, of course, we heard over the weekend as well that large numbers of troops, we're hearing tens of thousands of reservists are being called up or have already been called up right now. And it sounds to me, however, Manny, that in order to conquer Gaza, you're going to need a lot more than that. So what are you hearing about the number of just manpower involved in this?
It will be, I mean, it began on Saturday night. Orders are still being sent out today. The first troops are already showing up today and within the next couple of days. It will be tens of thousands, multiple tens of thousands. I'm not sure we can say the exact number, but a lot of troops and majority of them combat troops. And I think with that amount of troops, and it's important to note, not all of them are being sent to Gaza. Some of them are reservists who are then being deployed to Lebanon or to Syria or to the West Bank, and then swapping out the standing army troops there who are then being sent to Gaza instead. With that amount of troops, I think Israel can take control of all of Gaza with those numbers that I'm hearing. I think more of an issue is time. It's not an immediate thing. The troops need to be trained, they need to be briefed on the plans, they need to gear up, they need to get all the equipment, they need to make sure their tanks and their other vehicles are fixed up and up to spec. All the equipment needs to be delivered. There's a whole logistics part of all this to make sure that they're getting the food and all the supplies, and it could take several weeks before the army actually goes in and actually carries this out. And there's been also reports that this major expansion of the offensive is only expected to be implemented after Donald Trump, the US president, visits the region next week. So within the next week, we should see this pressure ramping up, and then this expansion of the offensive might begin slowly, maybe just an extra division going into Gaza or 2 divisions going into Gaza, and then only within a few more weeks will it ramp up even more. So I think there's still giving it some time to try and reach a hostage deal with Hamas. And I would say even the announcement that Israel said that it was calling up tens of thousands of reserves, I think that's even also part of the pressure on Hamas as a warning to them that if you don't try to reach a deal and agree to a ceasefire for the release of the hostages, then we will go in with these tens of thousands of reservists into Gaza.
In many ways, this rollout that you're describing reminds me of the very beginning of the war. In October 2023, there was some frustration over how slowly it was rolling out in the ground invasion, particularly. So let's put that to the side. But I just want to clarify something you said. Already about 30 to 40% of Gaza is a buffer zone. And as far as I understand it, that includes basically the entire city of Rafah that is no longer habitable to Gazans. And could this also just be part of the plan, just to take the outer edges and squeeze it and slowly conquer the whole territory eventually?
I think that's what we're looking at already. Right now, Rafah has been taken over essentially. There are a few pockets there of Hamas, several dozen, according to estimates I've heard of Hamas operatives in Rafah, mainly in the Shabura neighborhood. But the other areas of Gaza, around 2 kilometers in, is the buffer zone now, and it was 700 meters to a kilometer. It's now double that to 2 kilometers, and it is looking like a squeeze. But at the same time, I think with these plans, these plans to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza without it going via Hamas, there's been these I would say suggestions. They're not fully approved yet, but suggestions to establish a new humanitarian zone in the Rafah area where the army has control over, establish tent camps there for Palestinians to come and stay in those areas, and then it's areas where the army has sort of control over and won't allow Hamas members into those areas. These sort of things are taking shape. They're still suggestions right now, but I think when we see this expansion of the offensive and when Israel conquers when it says it's going to conquer Gaza, it will need to establish new zones for civilians to take shelter in and be provided aid and not be harmed by the military's action.
Right. And as opposed to the previous humanitarian zone, which was basically a space to get humanitarian aid to, not a safe zone, as we've clarified in previous podcasts, as opposed to that, by having Gazan civilians move back into Rafah, which is now basically under the control of the IDF, these people should also be in a safe area and be getting humanitarian aid. This is what I'm hearing from you. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's sort of the idea that's being suggested. Instead of selecting a zone in Gaza where aid is delivered to, but also Hamas is there, instead divert civilians to areas where the army controls, and then through these other aid organizations, the UN and all other groups, and even a private American security company, to be able to deliver the aid to them and make sure that they are protected when they're receiving aid, and also prevent Hamas from entering those areas. I think that's the goal for the delivering the aid.
What is really tricky, of course, is that Hamas is not only a terrorist organization, but it's also keeping some kind of order in the Gaza Strip. We heard reports yesterday that it is now embedding itself in all sorts of semi-civil administrations that are still being controlled by the Palestinians. So it's just a mass chaos right now, and kind of a recipe for disaster if Israel indeed is contemplating creating another West Bank situation of occupation. So, Manny, we have not solved this issue. We have not cracked this nut. We are not going to, obviously, and let's go to a short break.
Israel Bonds, the heartbeat of solidarity, the powerhouse of support. When the Israeli-Hamas war hit, Israel Bonds stood tall, proving we're more than just an investment, we're a lifeline. Israel Bonds pledges to ensure Israel thrives and flourishes. Investing in Israel Bonds isn't just a financial move, it's a declaration for resilience, strength, and a better future for Israel. Join us and let solidarity echo through generations.
And we're back. Yesterday, a Houthi ballistic missile struck the Ben Gurion International Airport in what is, of course, a distressing and very embarrassing situation, but it is also one that needs to be probed. And Manny, what can you share from the initial IDF probes into how this missile actually went through the big net of the anti-missile array that Israel has?
I think it's important to first note that since Israel resumed its fighting in Gaza, the Houthis have fired, I think, 27 ballistic missiles at Israel, and pretty much all of them were either shot down or fell short and didn't reach Israel, and this one got through the air defense systems. And before that, from the beginning of the war till the ceasefire in Gaza, there was, I think, more than 40 ballistic missiles as well, and pretty much all of them were shot down. There was, I think, one case where it hit Tel Aviv. So it's pretty rare for these ballistic missiles to make it through, but still there was a failure yesterday, and the Air Force's investigation into the failure to shoot it down has found, they call it a pinpoint technical malfunction with the interceptor itself. So the Arrow long-range air defense system engaged this Houthi missile. It fired an interceptor at it, and there was some sort of malfunction with the interceptor, not with the detection of the missile, not with the launcher, and not with the warning for the home front, but the interceptor itself had a malfunction, and for some reason it wasn't able to take down the missile. The Americans have the THAAD system deployed to Israel. They deployed it here last year following the tensions with Iran. And their system has also been engaging the Houthi missiles several times. And among those 27 that were shot down, some of them were shot down by the THAAD. In this case, for some, probably just a coincidence, the THAAD system, its interceptor missed the Houthi missile. It missed the target entirely, and it got through. I don't know how many other times the THAAD system has missed. I don't know their interception rates. It's an American system, so I'm less familiar with it, but it does work sort of in tandem with the Israeli defense system.
So it sounds like to me what you're saying now, Manny, is that there was a malfunction of the Chetz, the arrow system, which is Israeli, and the backup system, the THAAD system, or working in tandem, also missed this missile. So there was a malfunction, and the backup also malfunctioned, essentially, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know if it was a malfunction. That could be a human error or some other technical error. I don't know. I haven't been in contact with the Americans on this, so I don't know exactly what went wrong there, but I do know that it missed the target for one reason or another. And then you're in a situation where the missile can just get through because the lower tier air defense systems, the David Sling, the Iron Dome, or even the in development Iron Beam, the laser-based system, they're not relevant for a ballistic missile. They can't take them down. They're not designed to do that.
But a ballistic missile coming from Yemen is not something that happens in a matter of seconds. It's a matter of what? How long does it take a ballistic missile to come from Yemen? Do you know?
From Yemen, like 8 to 10 minutes.
Okay, so it's not hours, shall we say. So I understand what happened. It's just so puzzling to me. And of course, the very location of where it was hit is causing a massive ripple effect. And international airlines are canceling flights again. And it's just, we haven't seen the end of this, obviously. But so we've talked about two of the layers of the anti-missile array that Israel has. And one of the layers was taken out about a year ago. That's the Patriot system. And the New York Times reported yesterday that these Patriots that had been deployed to Israel are now being moved to Ukraine. But with this system also, I mean, it's not in use now. It's basically in mothballs here in Israel. But would this system have helped in this particular case? Do you have any idea, Manny?
I would say probably not. The reason why Israel got rid of the Patriot is actually because it wasn't really using it. So just for a sort of brief history, it was deployed in Israel during the Gulf War in 91. I'm not sure if it was deployed against the Scud missiles from Iraq. I wouldn't say successfully. There's been quite a bit of a dispute of how many it actually shot down. I think there's only evidence of one Scud missile that it shot down during the entire Gulf War. So not so effective, but even from then up until 2014, it didn't shoot down anything. And in 2014, it shot down a drone from Gaza, and then over the following decade, it only engaged 10 targets in total. So I wouldn't say it's the most effective system for Israel, but what it was designed for is actually shooting down planes. That's what the Patriot was designed for. And it did shoot down a Syrian fighter jet that breached Israeli airspace in 2018. But Israel realized that, over the years, it wasn't shooting down planes anymore. It didn't really need that. And it has other air defense systems like the David Sling, which is for medium range projectiles, has the Iron Dome for short range, it has the Arrow, of course, the Arrow 3, which is for the very long range ballistic missiles. So it didn't need it anymore, and it shut down all the units, and all the soldiers who were trained on these systems are now being trained on the Iron Dome. They even opened up a new Iron Dome battalion in replacing one of these Patriot systems. But for Ukraine, they really need these systems because they're trying to defend against Russian planes and Russian missiles, and it has proven to be useful for them. And that's why these systems, I don't remember exactly how many Israel has, but last year there was also a report that 90 interceptors were taken from Israel and sent to Ukraine, and now the New York Times reports that one of these, the batteries itself, is being sent to Ukraine as well. Israel's basically giving it back to the Americans, and then they send it off to Ukraine. So for them, it's very useful. For Israel, less so when you're dealing with mostly short-range rocket fire and sometimes these very long-range ballistic missiles, which are then intercepted by the Arrow 3. And if a fighter jet was to try and breach Israeli airspace, Israeli fighter jets would likely engage it instead, rather than a ground-based air defense system.
As a Jewish mother, I just want to say tfu about this, because obviously, may we not need these missiles, right, Manny?
Exactly.
Exactly. Let's turn now to the probe into the IDF battle at the Zikim beach it was basically, unfortunately, a battle that didn't really happen. And so on October 7th, Hamas terrorists infiltrated the beach on a number of boats. Manny will fill us in on the number. And the soldiers who were in the area, alongside the fishermen and people on the beach itself, the soldiers, unfortunately, did not really engage in any kind of proper manner, shall we say. So, Manny, it's a very painful probe. Let's dive into it.
Yeah, so this probe really one of the more frustrating ones to read or to write to you and myself. But what it boils down to is there was sort of three main sections of this investigation. There's the battle at the sea by the Navy. There's the attempts by Golani soldiers on the beach to try and defend against the terrorists that did make it ashore, but they mostly disengaged and fled. Maybe not fled is the right word, but they abandoned civilians that were on the beach. And then the third section, which is the remaining terrorists who tried to attack Kibbutz Zikim, failed to because the local security team managed to fight back. So in total, 38 terrorists set out from Gaza on 7 speedboats that morning as the rockets were being fired by Hamas. Some of the boats were heading for the Zikim beach. Some were trying to reach the Trans-Israel oil pipeline near Ashkelon. It's slightly further north than the Zikim beach, and some were also trying to go to the IDF bases, the Zikim training base, and there's a nearby logistics base in the area. The Navy at the time, it had a Dvorah-class patrol boat in the sea, and it engaged the first speedboat. It killed the 4 terrorists aboard. Another Dvorah boat was defending an offshore gas rig. It also arrived in the area, and they also engaged the other speedboats. But eventually, of the 7 speedboats, 2 managed to reach the shore without being harmed at all. Another 2 did reach the shore, but they were partially damaged, and several of the members were killed upon them. But essentially, at the point where the Golani soldiers reached the beach that morning, there were 5 terrorists that had just sort of landed at the shore, and they were heading towards the people at the beach. The Golani soldiers were basically met up with civilians who were hiding in the bathroom there. They told them to stay put, and at that point, according to the investigation, the soldiers basically left. They came under fire by the terrorists, but they fled to these sand dunes south of the beach. They passed by civilians who were hiding there as well. They fled. They withdrew even further, and the terrorists managed to. And another 5 terrorists would, of course, land at the beach just a short while later. Another boat. These 10 terrorists went and murdered 17 people. They murdered several people on the beach itself, 1 person in the parking lot, 7 people in the bomb shelter, 7 people in the bathroom, and the soldiers didn't really engage. They withdrew back. 1 soldier was killed in sort of an unclear circumstance. He sort of was. He told the soldier next to him that he was going to join up with the commander of the force, but instead he ran in the wrong direction, ran towards the terrorists, and was killed. Now, these 10 terrorists, after they carried out this murder on the beach, they took the Golani soldiers' van that they had left behind, and then they headed for Kibbutz Zikim. The local security squad, the defense team there, was already alerted in the morning that an infiltration was happening. They had taken up their posts already, and then when this van approached, the local security team opened fire on them. They managed to kill some of the terrorists, and then the others realized at one point that they couldn't reach the kibbutz anymore because they were facing pretty fierce resistance by the local security team. They ended up withdrawing and leaving the area. Over the following days, there were still several clashes in the Zikim area. October 8th, sort of the day after, 2 terrorists were killed near the beach by the Navy and by ground troops. On October 10, one of the terrorists was trying to reach the oil facility, was killed by troops on the ground. And then on October 11, 3 Maglan soldiers, the commando unit, exchanged fire with 2 terrorists who were hiding in a bomb shelter near the Shikma stream. It's really right in the same area. Both terrorists were killed, but of course the three soldiers were also killed in that exchange. fire. So there was still very active fighting over the following days, even though the terrorists didn't reach the kibbutz. The last thing that the investigation notes is that, unfortunately, only on October 13, so a week after the massacre, were the bodies of the 7 murdered inside the bomb shelter removed from the beach by rescue authorities. They, due to some mistake, the army calls it a severe error, these bodies were forgotten in the bomb shelter for a week and weren't recovered at all. But of all these 38 terrorists who infiltrated, 14 were killed sort of at sea by the Navy, 8 were killed as they reached the coast or on the beach area, then 10 were killed in later exchanges of fire. The final 6, the army believes they were also killed, but they can't fully confirm this. They don't have the exact information to fully prove it, but they do believe that they were also killed. Essentially, all of the terrorists who infiltrated via the sea at Zikim were killed.
Listeners, to learn about the lives of those lost during this Zikim beach battle, please check out our Those We Have Lost project on the Times of Israel website. Manny, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. Please check out another installment tomorrow. This episode was produced by the Podwaves and video edited by Thomas Gersh. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until tomorrow, shalom.